What if the man waiting for you at the end of a 2,000-mile journey wasn't the groom you were promised, but the one your heart was secretly meant for? The Wyoming wind howled across the barren plains as Eleanor Dawson pressed her face against the dusty stagecoach window. Everything she owned was packed in one small trunk and squeezed dreams inside her chest. She held a crumpled letter in her gloved hands, the promise that brought her from the quiet cobblestone streets of Boston all the way to the raw frontier. "End of the line, miss," the driver called out. The coach jerked to a stop. Eleanor staggered, gripping the worn leather seat before stepping down into the settlement of Willow Creek. A few weather-beaten buildings stood crooked along the main street, their walls pale from years of sun and wind. Nothing about this place felt welcoming, not like the polished letters Charles Whitley had sent her. He had written of comfort, good meals, warm fires, and a fine home. But standing here at the edge of nowhere, Eleanor felt only dread. "You the mail-order bride for Whitley?" the driver asked, dropping her trunk with a thud. She nodded, though her stomach twisted tight. Charles Whitley's handwriting had been charming, his promises sweet, but she had learned in Boston that men often wrote sweeter than they lived. "You're supposed to have someone meeting you," the driver muttered. "Place is 15 miles north. No way I'm leaving you out here alone after dark." As if summoned by his words, the sound of hooves rolled across the open plains. Eleanor shaded her eyes, watching a single rider appear through the dust. He moved with quiet ease on a sturdy bay horse. When he dismounted, she felt her breath catch. He was nothing like Whitley described himself to be. This man was lean and strong, with the kind of face carved by years of sun and weather. No fancy suit, no polished boots. Only honest eyes the color of the clear morning sky. "Ma'am," he said gently, touching the brim of his hat. "Thomas Callahan. I'm here about the bride arrangement." Eleanor stiffened. "Mr. Callahan, I think there has been some mistake. I'm expecting Mr. Charles Whitley." Quote. Thomas shifted his boots in the dirt. "Yes, ma'am, there's been a situation. North Road's washed out. Mr. Whitley sent word for me to collect you, bring you to my place for the night. He'll fetch you come morning." The stagecoach driver was already climbing up to leave. "Seems settled then," he said. "Good luck to you, miss." Dust swallowed the coach as it pulled away, leaving Eleanor standing with a stranger and a trunk full of doubt. "I don't understand," she said carefully. "Mr. Whitley never mentioned you." Thomas looked away, something tight crossing his jaw. "No, ma'am." "I reckon he wouldn't have." He lifted her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "There ain't a hotel here. Boarding house is 20 miles south. My ranch is 5 miles west. You'll have your own room, I give you my word." His voice wasn't polished. It wasn't charming. But it was steady, sure. Like a man who didn't speak promises he couldn't keep. Eleanor felt the sinking fear of having no choice. Night was coming fast. The Wyoming plains were no place for a woman alone. "Very well," she said, lifting her chin. "But this arrangement is only for one night." "You have my word." He helped her mount his horse, his hands careful and respectful. Then he swung up behind her, warm and solid in the cold wind. As they rode through the vast land, Eleanor stole glances at the endless sky stretching above them. Snow-dusted mountains rose like giants in the distance, and for the first time in months, something inside her eased. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Thomas seemed surprised. "Most folks from back east find it empty." "I've had my fill of crowded places," she murmured. "There's honesty in all this space." They reached his ranch just as dusk settled over the land, a small cabin, a barn, smoke curling from the chimney. Nothing like the grand estate Whitley promised. Yet something about the place felt safe. Inside, the cabin was simple but neat. A stone fireplace glowed warmly. Rough wooden furniture held the marks of a man who worked with his hands. Thomas lit a lamp, washing the room in soft golden light. "You must be hungry," he said. "I'll eat some stew." Eleanor watched him move around the kitchen, surprised by the quiet skill in his hands. "Mr. Callahan?" she asked gently. "How do you know Mr. Whitley?" His spoon paused midair. "We have business dealings, cattle," but his tone told her there was much he wasn't saying. They ate in comfortable silence. Thomas didn't ask about her past. He didn't pry. He just offered her food, warmth, and space to breathe. It felt strange and unexpectedly comforting. When supper was done, he cleaned the dishes without being asked, then turned to her. "You can take the room," he said. "I'll sleep in the barn tonight. Just holler if you need anything." "The barn?" Eleanor blinked. "But this is your home." "You're a lady under my roof," he said simply. "I won't do anything improper." He left before she could argue, his silhouette disappearing into the cold night. Eleanor sat by the fire alone, her thoughts swirling. Nothing about today made sense. Whitley's letters suddenly felt false, too polished, too perfect. Thomas Callahan, with his tired hands and honest eyes, made her feel something Whitley never had. Safe, seen, alive. Later, when she lay in the small bed, she heard the wind pick up, rattling the windows. She imagined Thomas sleeping in the cold barn because he chose respect over comfort. As she drifted off, one thought pulsed in her heart like a secret flame. Maybe being sent to the wrong man wasn't a mistake at all. What happens when a woman meant for another man begins to feel safer in the arms of the wrong one? Eleanor woke before sunrise, the sky outside still pale and cold. She wrapped herself in her cloak and stepped outside. Thomas was already working, hammering a loose board on the corral fence. His breath came out in white clouds, his movements steady and sure despite the morning chill. "Morning, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. "Coffee's on the stove." 3 days had passed, 3 long days with no word from Charles Whitley. At first, Eleanor waited anxiously, then she waited with anger. Now she waited with something else entirely. Confusion. Why had Whitley not come? Why send someone else to fetch her? And why this man? Thomas brought in more firewood, his shirt dusted with frost. "Road's been clear since yesterday," he admitted quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't say sooner." Eleanor froze. The North Road wasn't washed out. Whitley simply hadn't come. Her heart tightened with humiliation, with hurt. She had come all this way for a man who didn't want her enough to show up. "I should go to town," she said sharply. "Find lodging. I cannot stay here forever." Thomas nodded slowly. "The boarding house isn't fit for you. Folks there aren't kind. And winter's coming hard. Then, what do you suggest?" "Stay here, work for your keep, till you figure things out." His voice wasn't demanding, not even hopeful, just honest. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. Thomas looked down at his hands. "Maybe because I know what it feels like to have nowhere to go." That afternoon, Eleanor insisted on helping with chores. Thomas tried to argue, but she ignored him. He taught her how to gather eggs without getting pecked. She surprised him with how confidently she worked. "You've done this before," he said. "My grandmother kept chickens before Father made his fortune." Thomas nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "Seems Boston society didn't take all the grit out of you." They settled into a rhythm. Eleanor cooked while Thomas worked the ranch. She scrubbed floors, hung curtains from scraps of cloth, and made the cabin warmer, gentler. Thomas spoke softly to the horses, taught her how to watch the sky for storms, and fixed anything she touched that broke. And each day the silence between them grew more meaningful. One evening, dark clouds rolled low across the sky. The air felt heavy, like the whole world was holding its breath. Thomas stepped onto the porch, watching the restless horses pace in their pen. "Storm's coming," he said. "What should we do?" "Shutter the windows, bring in firewood, move the animals to shelter." They worked together without speaking. Snow began falling, fat, cold flakes that stuck to their hair and clothes. The wind rose to a shrill howl, cutting through their coats. By the time they finished, the world outside had turned white. Inside, the cabin glowed warm from the fire. Thomas added more wood, glancing at her through the flickering light. "This storm's a bad one," he said. "Might last days." Eleanor's heart thudded, alone with him. In one small cabin. For days. She went to her small room, layering blankets, but the cold seeped through the walls. The temperature plunged, and even curled beneath thick covers. She shivered, uncontrollably. Hours passed. The storm worsened. The wind screamed like a living thing. Unable to bear the cold, she stepped into the main room. Thomas sat near the fire, shoulders stiff, feeding the flames. "You'll freeze in that room," he said without looking up. "I think we both will," she answered quietly. "The cold is too strong. We need to stay near the fire, together." Thomas stilled. She saw the battle inside him, the gentleman he wanted to be fighting the man he was, practical and honest. Finally, he nodded. "I'll stay on one side. You stay on the other." Quote. They sat across from each other, wrapped in separate blankets, the fire crackling between them. But as the storm howled louder, they edged closer to the warmth and to each other. Her teeth chattered despite her bravery. She felt foolish, fragile. "Tell me something," she whispered. "Anything." Thomas stared at the fire before answering. "I came west after the war, built this place board by board. Wanted a quiet life." "And the war?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "Seen enough fighting to last a lifetime." She told him about Boston, the suffocating rules, the scandal that ruined her. A broken engagement when she refused to marry a cruel man. "He hit his valet," she said softly. "Everyone said it was normal for a man to lose his temper." "I didn't believe that." "Good," Thomas said firmly. "Man who lays a hand on someone weaker isn't a man at all." Hours passed as they talked in low voices, learning each other's fears and hopes. The fire warmed them, but not enough. Their blankets weren't enough. The storm pressed colder and colder. Without thinking, Eleanor moved closer. She reached for the heat of his presence. Thomas stiffened, but didn't pull away. His arm came around her slowly, protective, careful. "Just until the storm breaks," she whispered. "Just until then," he said. But the storm didn't break. By the second night, the cold forced them even closer. Eleanor woke curled against his chest, her head resting where his heartbeat thumped strong and steady beneath her ear. She should have moved. But she didn't. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be." His voice was rough with sleep. "Haven't felt, not alone in a long time." Their eyes met. Something shifted in the firelight, soft but powerful. "Thomas," she breathed. His hand cupped her cheek. A gentle touch, a dangerous one. "We shouldn't," he whispered. "You're meant for another man." "Am I?" she said, her voice trembling with truth. "He didn't come for me. You did." His breath caught, just as he leaned closer. But then the fire popped loudly, startling them both. He pulled away abruptly, jaw tight, his heart pounding against her palm. The moments slipped through their fingers. Morning came bright and white. The storm finally passed, leaving the world covered in snow. The fragile space between them broke, replaced with awkward silence. But the connection remained, alive, warm, and impossible to forget. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered as he reached for his coat. "For what?" "For everything." He said nothing, but in his eyes, something new glowed like a spark, waiting for the right moment to catch fire. What would you risk for the one person who made you feel alive for the first time in your life? The morning after the storm, the world looked clean and white, but inside the small cabin nothing felt simple anymore. Eleanor watched Thomas saddle his horse, his movements stiff and uncertain. They spoke politely, carefully, like two people afraid to touch the truth that had sparked between them during the storm. But everything changed that afternoon. Thomas had just finished chopping wood when a rider approached fast, Sam Henderson from the neighboring ranch. His face was tight with concern. "Tom," Sam called, sliding off his horse. "Whitley's in town, drunk and running his mouth. Says he's coming tomorrow to collect his property," meaning her. Eleanor's blood went cold. Property. Thomas's temper snapped like dry timber. She is not his. Sam raised both hands. "I'm just telling you what he said. He's riding with 3 of his men. Real mean types." When Sam left, Eleanor turned to Thomas. "I'm not something to be collected." "You're not going anywhere near that man," Thomas said, voice low and dangerous. "Then what do we do?" "You pack your things. I'll take you to the Hendersons. You'll stay with Sarah until—" "No," Eleanor stepped closer. "I won't run from him." "You have to," Thomas insisted. "Whitley's powerful. He has friends in town, money, influence, men who follow orders without question." "Then let him come," she said fiercely. "Let him see the woman he abandoned. Let him see I am not afraid of him anymore." Thomas stared at her, pained. "Eleanor, if he comes here, I'll have to fight him. You understand that?" Quote. Her heartbeats sped up, but she didn't look away. "And I won't let you fight alone." Something inside Thomas broke in that moment, not from anger, but from the fear of losing her. He reached out, grabbing her hand, pressing it to his chest. "I can't lose you," he said hoarsely. "Not after." He stopped. She waited. "Not after what?" she whispered. "Not after you made this place feel like home." Her breath caught. The truth she'd been holding back surged forward. "Thomas!" She lifted his face to hers. "I don't want to leave." His control crumbled. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he had finally realized she was everything he'd ever wanted. Their lips met, not with hesitation now, but with weeks of longing, fear, and relief. By the time they pulled apart, both were trembling. "That settles it," Thomas said quietly. "If Whitley wants trouble, he's going to find it waiting." The next morning dawned bright and sharp. A hard blue sky hung over the snow-covered land. Eleanor stood on the porch beside Thomas as 5 riders approached. Charles Whitley rode at the front, bloated with confidence and dressed in a fine suit that didn't fit the rugged land around him. Thomas stepped forward, rifle resting easy in his hands. Whitley dismounted, sneering. "Miss Dawson." "Mrs. Callahan." Thomas cut in. Whitley blinked. "What?" "Mrs. Eleanor Callahan," Thomas repeated, his voice calm but strong. Eleanor stepped forward. "You had 3 weeks, Mr. Whitley. You never came. You abandoned me at the station like luggage. Whatever arrangement you imagined between us is over." Whitley's face purpled. "You think you can refuse me?" "I already have," Eleanor said. "One word," Whitley snapped, "and the sheriff will arrest you for breach of—" "There was no contract," she said sharply. "Only promises you failed to keep." One of his hired men reached for his gun. Morrison, the dead-eyed one Thomas had warned her about. "If you aim that weapon," Thomas warned softly, "you won't live long enough to pull the trigger." Something in his tone made the man hesitate. Whitley puffed himself up, glaring at her. "You belong to me." Quote. "No," Eleanor said, her voice ringing out clear in the cold air. "I belong to myself, and I choose him." With that, she reached for Thomas's hand. He squeezed it, grounding her, steadying her. A murmur rose among the watching neighbors who had gathered quietly along the road. People who once feared Whitley now watched with narrowed eyes, seeing him clearly for the first time. Whitley sensed it too. His power was slipping. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I'll ruin both of you." "No," Thomas said calmly. "You already tried. Now, get off my land." Whitley stared between them, stunned to see his control broken. Then, with a roar of fury, he spun his horse around and rode away, his men following. The moment the dust settled, Eleanor sagged against Thomas. He caught her easily, pressing his forehead to hers. "It's done," he said. But Eleanor shook her head. "Not done. Just started." She pulled him down for a fierce kiss, one that sealed everything. Their fear, their fight, their choice. That night, Thomas held her close, his arms wrapped around her like he was afraid she might disappear. And for the first time since she'd left Boston, Eleanor felt something she had almost forgotten. She belonged, not because a man claimed her, but because a good man chose her. Because she chose him. And somewhere between the fire and the snow, the storm and the sunrise, she understood something deeper. This gentle cowboy was the only man who had ever seen her heart. No letters, no promises, just quiet actions, honest words, and a strength that made her feel safe enough to love again. Thomas brushed her hair back softly. "I'm glad you came here," he whispered. She kissed him, slow and warm. "I'm glad you found me." Outside, the Wyoming wind howled, but inside their small cabin, a different fire burned, wild, bright, and true, a fire that would last far beyond dawn.